Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Battery Mates podcast. I am Sean. Over there to my right, my right is Delaney. And down below us, you're going to recognize that we have a very special guest with us today. None other than the current Braves color analyst and former big league pitcher, CJ Nitkowski. CJ, thanks for joining us today.
Sean Delaney, oops, yeah, there we go. Sorry. Pleased to be with you guys. How y'all doing?
Doing well,
Oh,
doing well. Happy to be here.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think the smile on Delaney's face says it all. We're pretty excited to have you on today. And so we figured with spring training kicking off, pitchers and catchers reporting here in the next week or so, that we would kind of take a sneak peek into what it's like as going into spring training, your thoughts on the off season so far, and kind of what we expect here in 2025. So um, I'm going to kick it off here kind of with a general question, but CJ, for you as an analyst, is it different watching the offseason unfold in a role like that versus your average everyday fan that's watching it? And we all have our opinions about the Brit teams need this and that we need to do this. And is it different watching it from that your seat, or do you still kind of see it the way that we see it?
I'd say it's probably similar. I mean, for the diehards, right? For the fans that absolutely love the team, that understand the depth, the details, the things that are most important, it's probably similar. I think that, the rumors leading up to certain things, whether they happen or don't, is when I start coming my research and start digging in a little bit deeper. But you ride the wave just like everybody else does. You start to hear a rumor, it doesn't happen, you get really disappointed. You start to hope, right? All of the things I think that we all have been through as Braves fans. I will say this organization does an exceptional job of not leaking. So we don't get nearly the leaks that other organizations get in their fan bases. Like, we all get excited about the blue square. Like, as I sit there and just kind of scroll through my feed, I'm like everybody else. I'm just kind of waiting. I'm like, all right, what's the release? They don't reach out to me like, hey, heads up, in 5 minutes we're going to tweet this out. Like, I'm like every other fan in that regard. So we don't get the build up maybe as much as the other fan bases do. I will tell you that being in this business, I also respect the fact that the Braves are able to pull it off. It's not easy to do because there's a lot of people that like to talk, myself included. That's why I never ask too many questions. I don't want to know too much information. But no, I would say that I probably follow it with the same passion. I think it's very similar. It's just a matter of once something happens, then I really get to work and what I need to get ready for and start doing a lot more research and preparing myself for spring training and those eventual interviews and everything else that'll come along with a new player that joins the organization.
Awesome. So speaking of new players joining the organization, what are you most excited about with the new guys that we have coming in? And what are you most looking out for, in spring training itself?
So Jurickson Profar obviously is the big name so far from the offseason, a guy that I got to cover for a couple of years with the Texas Rangers. I think we all looked at kind of what the offseason needed to be or potentially would be here for the Braves, and an outfielder was a big one. I like this sign a lot. It was very interesting to listen to Alex Anthopoulos talk about Jurickson Profar as the second best outfield bat that he thought was going to be available this offseason behind Juan Soto. Those are big words, and he knew they were big words when he said them. But they saw adjustments from him last year. It's been kind of an up and down last couple of seasons, but last year was strong. 3 years ago was really strong. It was the in-between year where he really struggled. This guy has got all the talent in the world. If you remember, he was in the big leagues as a 19-year-old. There's a lot to like. It didn't quite work out early on the way I think a lot of people thought, but he made big adjustments. The Braves believe in those adjustments, and they needed this position answered. And the fact that they have themselves an everyday outfielder and a guy that's done some pretty good things brings a lot of passion to the table as well. I'm excited about that. In particular, I love that Curacao is now Braves country. I think we absolutely can claim it as ours, which makes me want to go visit because I know it's beautiful. I play with quite a few guys from Curacao and have coaches like Hensley Mullins and others from Curacao as well. And they always just talk about what a beautiful country that it is. So I think it's about time that there's some kind of Braves-themed trip to Curacao. We'll see if we can get them to pay for it, and we'll all go along. Maybe take the Braves plane there. But I think that's probably the most exciting as far as new players go, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Alex did say that some of what may happen will go into spring training and never put it past them at all to make a move. But again, we'll all be surprised when it happens because we probably won't hear much about it. But that was a big answer for them to be able to add one more bat in a position where they needed an answer. And I'm glad he's going to be with us for the next 3 years.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think it's even bigger with the fact that, we're expecting Ronnie back the beginning of May. But to kind of have him fill in, and then you've kind of got, what probably might be a platoon with Kelnick and De La Cruz. Um, but I think when you look at the potential outfield that Profar, Michael Harris II, and Ronald Acuna Jr. can be, I think it's really hard to not be excited about that outfield. Um, but with Profar coming on, yeah, we had quite a few departures that I think a lot of Braves fans, you kind of stung for a lot of them for a lot of different reasons. But the ones obviously that stick out, you've got Freed, you've got Morton, you've got TDA, you've got AJ Minter. Um, those guys that have been with the Braves for quite a while, or Morton and TDA, who really just the fan base kind of stuck to those guys. Morton goes out and breaks his leg in that World Series game. TDA just was that guy that always kept the vibe up, so to speak. You just kind of felt like TDA was never somebody that got down. And so, when you lose four guys like that, Minter and Freed both being with the organization for big leagues for 7 years almost. Um, how do from as a former player, how do people like that seem to set such a mood in the clubhouse, or Freed Morton with the rotation and the staff? How uh, do you see, like, hey, maybe there's some other players that are going to have to step up, and there might be some new clubhouse leaders that have to emerge to kind of keep the ball rolling, and to handle some of those things and those roles that we're losing with those guys.
Yeah, I think the biggest one when you talk about stepping up is probably going to be the bullpen, right? I think not having AJ back and Joe Jimenez down, what seems like maybe could be the whole season. We'll see how it plays out. There is a need, there is an opportunity for somebody else to step in. I do believe Daysbel Hernandez is going to get that opportunity to take on a larger role. I'm excited about that because I think last year, in the brief time that we saw him, we realized how impact he really can be, and we also saw Snit start to trust him pretty early. That's a big deal, right? To be able to gain the trust. So there's an opportunity there. I think with Max, they just were not going to be able to afford him. I mean, everyone's happy for him that he got the big deal and he gets to go to New York. And if you think about the way the rotation kind of looks right now, and we listen to what Alex has had to say about the rotation, I think it's absolutely legitimate and fair. I know we all want to see somebody else kind of come in and not replace Max, but just another kind of outside reinforcement. But we know Spencer Strider. We expect him to be back. We'll see what it's going to be. Maybe May. It sounds like everything is going along really well. And knowing him, he probably will try to get back before that. And then if you think about having the four guys with, of course, Ronaldo Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach is really exciting, and then Chris Sale, you're now talking about one spot for Ian Anderson and Grant Holmes. And I think it's fair to say that you don't want to block those guys, and especially in the case of the idea that Ian could be back. We'd be very excited if it was the Ian that we remember from just a couple of years ago, and I think they believe that's the case. And he's out of options, right? So there's not a lot you can do. He's got to be in the big leagues, so you're going to risk losing him. I think that's why we haven't seen a starter added as far as trying to replace Max. The Travis one surprised me a little bit when it first happened because I thought the option was reasonable. And again, then you listen to the front office talk about the idea that they wanted to free up money so they had flexibility. There wasn't necessarily a planned move that was going to happen, but between that and the Soler trade, it was really about cash, I think, for them and making sure that they had some available should the right move present itself. And then I think it also put Sean Murphy in a position, while, yes, that was a true platoon that they had behind the plate, it's going to be more playing time for him. And I know he missed 2 months last year, and that was big when he missed that time after the oblique on opening day. But what we saw 2 years ago was Sean Murphy set a career high in home runs, and I think that they believe he can get back there. And so more playing time, maybe that goes to a 75 or even 80% playing time situation for him, and whether it's Chadwick Tromp or somebody else that'll be the number two, I think it wouldn't have worked as well if Travis was in that position and you were paying him. I believe the option was like $8 million. So it's sad to see him leave for sure because he's so respected and such a great guy. I was a little bit surprised to see it happen, but I also see the game plan when they start to talk about it. And I do think 75, 80% of Sean Murphy is going to be a good thing for this lineup.
Definitely. And you bring up young guys like Chadwick Tromp and some of the other younger arms as well. After the musical chair of starters last season due to injuries and not even just limited to pitchers, do you think it's risky to bet on guys like Holmes, like Elder, like Ian Anderson, especially when we don't know how he's going to come back, Smith Shawver, Waldrop, all those guys kind of fill the innings lost with Freed and Morton and cover any extra innings?
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate concern. I'd say this, Delaney, thinking about what we saw last year, where they were trying to give Ronaldo Lopez and Chris Sale extra days as much as they could, right? And that, unfortunately, that rotating spot with Strider down, it didn't go well, right? The numbers were not good. I have it written on my scorecard. I can't remember what they were, but basically what we call the other starts, they were ugly. And it's not a knock on any of the guys, but I feel like they're in a stronger position to fill that spot than where they were a year ago. I mean, injuries happen, guys miss time. We know it's going to pop up, but you have guys that are a little bit more experienced now. Yeah, they're still young, but at least they have some experience under their belt. Thinking about AJ, thinking about Waldrop, we'll see how that plays out. So, would you like to have another guy? Like, I look at what's left on the market as far as free agents go, and I think about a guy like Kyle Gibson or Lance Lynn, and saying, would we rather have a guy like that now? It's going to cost you probably $8 to $10 million to bring him in, but then it pushes one of the other guys out of the rotation. And then once Strider gets back, neither one of those guys that we're looking at, Anderson and Holmes, necessarily to get the chance to start. So the risk of bringing somebody in is kind of an innings eater, and Kyle Gibson is a great example of a good innings eater. I think Lance Lynn, the same thing. Or even Andrew Heaney. I like Andrew Heaney. Like, if they were looking at him at even probably a 2-year deal, I'd be in on that because there is a little bit more of a track record there. But I just don't think they're going to do it to do it, if that makes sense. I think it would have to really be the right fit. And now that I think something we had to get past too, regarding kind of what you're getting at, the depth of, why we bring somebody else in, because, the depth of starting pitching, what happened last year got tested and didn't work out as well as maybe we would have liked. I do think that with the Padres in particular, we had to get past Roki Sasaki making his decision, because I think if he went to the Padres, they would have probably moved one of their starters. I think they still may move Dylan Cease or Michael King. I'll take either one of those guys all day long. But I think that probably slowed potentially those conversations down a little bit as well. And certainly a guy like Cease would cost a lot, and we'd love to bring him home to Georgia. He grew up just down the street from where I'm at in Alpharetta. He's a Milton guy. So, yeah, we'd love to see it. But I think that you run the risk of just kind of boxing yourself out and getting really expensive to bring those guys in. So I'll take them at their word. Holmes was such a great story last year. He has great value in the bullpen. We know that. So if they were to go and get a starter and he had to slide and help in the bullpen, that's only a plus. But if they don't, I like to see him start for a month. He was another guy that earned snitch trust. Something I've learned, as a player, and then you see it as a broadcaster, is that once you get a veteran manager to trust you, it means everything. It tells you the story that we need to know. And that was Daysbell at the end. That was Grant Holmes at the end. Certainly Spencer Schwellenbacher and that as well. I think we're in good shape with some of these guys. And I know Holmes, we don't say he's a young guy in the sense of age, but he's a young guy in the sense of his big league career, and got to see that debut, or what he did last year, and how good it was. So I'm okay with the young group that we have. I just think that if you're going to make a move, if you're going to bring anybody else in to basically push everybody else down one, it'd probably have to be something to the level of Cease or King.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that again, if you trust who you have in Ian Anderson, or if you trust that Grant Holmes can be what he was last year, or heck, we forget, just kind of because of the struggles. But 2 years ago, Bryce Elder was an all-star. Like, we've got some guys down there that know how to pitch, and then of course, obviously, I'm super high on AJ Smith-Shawver. I think that he has all the stuff to make a very good starting pitcher in the big leagues. I think his changeup is developing extremely well as far as the analytics look on it. I saw something on social media the other day that where its value and its effectiveness are almost to the level of Waldrop's splitter. And so when you hear those sorts of things, it's like, okay, that's exciting. And so, but I'm glad that you mentioned Holmes being in the bullpen and his flexibility there, because another thing I was gonna touch on with these young arms is as a fan, what is the realistic expectation you can have for some of these young guys? Because I think what happens is sometimes we forget we just need somebody to hold the fifth spot in the rotation, and kind of to give those guys some rest, to make sure that we try to keep them as fresh as possible with Sale, Ronaldo, Strider, who's injury concerns and some age and some things like that. And so, I mean, is it one of these things where we just have such high expectations for the Braves after 200+ win seasons that to have those guys struggle a little bit, we forget that, like, hey, that's just our fifth guy, and then are we going to see some of those guys maybe have an opportunity in the bullpen? I'm somebody that thinks, Waldrop with his fastball splitter, I think you could put him in the bullpen, and I think he would be an excellent 1 to 2 inning guy out of the bullpen. But again, so kind of what's the realistic expectation as a fan? What should we have for those guys, those young arms, and then kind of how do we give ourselves a leash with that, as far as not, screaming the sky is falling every time they have a rough outing or a rough start.
Yeah,
Have you
so
met
I'd say
Braves
this.
fans?
Yeah, Holmes is definitely the best swingman option. And again, age is not young, but young in his career as far. And we saw it last year. So I think that if you talk about who's going to go to the bullpen, I think if everything works out the way that they hope, with Strider gets back and Ian Anderson's throwing the ball well, I think it's an easy decision that, assuming Holmes was in the rotation to start the year, that he would be your bullpen option. There's great value in what he does, but you also bring up a really good point, and that is with Chris Sale, with Ronaldo Lopez, and Spencer Strider. What are we expecting for total starts? Like, what's really a good number? I know that we always assume that you're going to build off the year before, but Alex has been honest about that. I mean, both Sale and Lopez exceeded expectations by a wide margin. Is it fair to expect them to do that again? Probably not. This game is really hard. Right? I know a lot of it, and myself included, sometimes like, hey, well, that part will just happen. What about the rest, right? Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that part will happen. You have to be prepared for it. So should it be closer to 25 starts apiece? I mean, Chris Sale doesn't want to hear that. He wants to make 32 and give you 180 to 200 innings. We love that about him and the way he goes about his business. But as we deal with, what could be, I do think you have to be a little bit concerned about that. I would say on Waldrop, too early for me to put him in a bullpen role. I want him to continue to make starts. I say me as if I'm making any decisions, but if I were to see it out, I'd rather him be starting in the minor leagues than putting him in the bullpen now. Now, if it gets to the end of the year and you need some help and you need an arm and he profiles that way and it's a kind of a desperate situation and you're past the deadline, then sure, I have no problem with him coming out and helping in the bullpen. But that development for a guy who just got drafted, I prefer to see continue to make those starts, especially since he missed some time last year. I don't know if Ian Anderson is as good of a bullpen option. Not to say that he can't get it done, not that he couldn't be in a longer role. But I think coming off the injury, looking pretty good toward the end of the year, you'd like to make him make steady starts. But again, he has no options left. So he's going to be with the team one way or another. So you may be forced to put a guy like that in the bullpen. But if you're relatively young, like a lot of these guys are, I prefer that they continue to make their starts, unless from a development standpoint, as you sat there and watched what you've seen so far, and you say, and I don't think this would be the case, but just use AJ as an example, if you just felt like he profiles better in the bullpen. There's a lot of teams that have to deal with this when they have really good arms, and it hasn't quite worked out just yet. Now, he's young enough for I'd rather see him start and just kind of randomly used him as an example, but with another organization named like Jack Leiter, right? I think the Rangers are in a spot where this is a big-time arm, high draft pick, comes out of Vanderbilt. They're going to have to start wondering, is he a reliever or is he a starter? I don't think the Braves are in that situation with their young guys just yet. I think you got some time to be able to figure out. And again, if you need that time, then that's maybe when you go out and you get that veteran to eat some innings again, going back to the Kyle Gibson or Andrew Heaney example.
Definitely. I do want to take it a little bit dark here for a second, because we are Braves fans and we do always think that the world is crumbling around us when we don't get our little blue squares as often as everybody else does. And this honestly kind of came from my boss, who's a huge Braves fan. So it's funny that we found each other in Miami, but what do you have to say to the fans who just don't feel excited about this team? I've seen some fans that have compared this last year to the rebuild years and just don't feel like we've made the proper moves to fill some of the holes that we've developed over the past couple of years. Especially with an ownership group like Liberty Media that owns F1 and has the wiggle room to make some splashy deals like Juan Soto and Trey Turner. So what do you have to say to those fans?
So, I get it too. We've been spoiled here, and I've lived in Atlanta for a long time, so I follow this team really closely. You sit there and you go up and down the line and really start looking at the roster. You can't do it every year. And I think what the Braves have done so exceptionally well is what they've done with locking up players, right? If you look at the amount of actual multi-year contracts that they have, there are not very many teams, maybe the Dodgers now with the nonsense that's going on in LA. But for the most part, when you look at, long-term deals, and some of them are shorter, obviously, with Profar saying 3 years. But if you sit there and really look at the payroll and how many guys they have locked in, it's a big number. It's a really big number. It's a very manageable payroll, but it is a huge number when you look at the total of the multi-year guaranteed deals that they have. So I don't have a problem with the way that it's gone. I think we have to be honest and be objective and look at the roster and say, where were the holes? I know there was some talk about shortstop, and that was a big one, right, this winter. And I would say this, and I'm an Orlando Arcia apologist, because he's the kind of guy that I would want playing behind me. As the guy who used to get a lot of ground balls, that is the shortstop that I want. And now, because of the way this team is built, I want him batting ninth and hitting 15 homers and playing good defense. That's all I want. If that means that the on base is low and the batting average is low, so be it. But when you have this team, there just wasn't very many places that you were going to look and say, where can we fix it? And so Willie Adames, I wondered about it too, and wondered if they were going to go there with him. But I don't think the shortstop was out there. It was a couple of years ago where we had a frenzy of really good shortstops that were hitting free agency and huge money was spent. But that wasn't this year. That wasn't available. So the upgrade. Willie Adames, quite honestly, probably has to come off short eventually anyway. If you look at his defensive numbers, they're not great. I know he's a good player. We'll see how he does in San Francisco. But I'm okay with them not making that move, especially at that price tag. Could we have used another starter? We've kind of gone back and forth. Maybe. I mean, again, I could go either way on it. I think of the top guys that were out there, Corbin Burns, you weren't going to give him a couple $100 million, and he wanted to go home to Arizona anyway. I mean, that's the thing that ended up working out. If you weren't going to give Max a couple hundred, you certainly weren't going to give it to anybody else. There were a couple of guys, though, that I thought maybe that they would be able to bring in. But again, it got expensive. I mean, the market really took off in a big way this year. And again, we'll blame the Dodgers for that because we're going to blame them for everything for a while. But I don't think so. I think, listen, the guy who I kind of had my eye on a little bit was Teoscar Hernandez. But they actually like the bat of Profar better. And I'll take him at their word. And another guy who didn't want to leave LA. He was very honest about that. So to pull him away and have him come play left field, you were going to overpay. And it's the one thing about this payroll and the way that it's done. And you listen to Alex talk, and he's done it in the past at different places that he has been, where you make a move just to make a move because you feel like you have to make a move. And then you end up regretting that move. There are a lot of regrettable contracts in Major League Baseball. And they've shown restraint, and they've put together a really, really competitive team. So, would you like to see the payroll go up to 250? I guess we all would. But I don't think you just want to spend money just to spend it, because then we're mad in 3 years. I don't look at this team right now and say, man, look at this contract. The fact that they got rid of Soler's deal and didn't have to pay a dime on that is a miracle. That is a miracle that they pulled that off. He obviously does not want to play the outfield anymore. We saw with the defense, and he couldn't DH here because Marcel's here. That was amazing that they were able to get that without having to eat any of that contract. And so I think they're positioned if they have to, whether it's before the season starts, come deadline time. But we do get spoiled. You can't spend it all the time. You can't go big. Listen, that Soto contract, we'll see. The back end of that's probably not going to be pretty. He's going to be a DH. He's not, I know he's a Gold Glove finalist. He's not a good defender, and he's not a good base runner. He's an amazing hitter. He's an amazing hitter, but that's it, right? It's one tool for $765 million. I think that's going to come back to regret them. More often than not, I actually thought, not to spin this to a Yankee thing, but just in general, I thought the Yankees were better off not giving him $760 million and go spend the money somewhere else. And I think, and they're a little bit tied up a little bit. So I like the way that the Braves do it. I think it puts you in the best position. We all want to see a splash all the time because it's fun. Where we get a hit of dopamine every time we see it, we get excited. This is going to be a really good team. The National League East is going to be great. We were talking about today on my radio show that I do on XM. And our producer was trying to pigeonhole us into saying, like, this is the Mets division to lose and nobody else has a chance. And obviously, I'm not objective, but my co-host is a little bit more objective. And he said, absolutely not. Between the Phillies and the Braves and the Mets, this division is going to be really tough. And outside of injuries and any shocking things that happen, there is no reason to believe that the Braves will not be in this thing.
I couldn't agree more. And a couple things you said there, I want to piggyback off of, because I am the biggest Orlando Arcia apologist also. The Braves fans are mad at Orlando Arcia because we signed him to be a 9-hole hitter to play Gold Glove level defense, and we had to bat him 5th last year because everybody and their dog was hurt at different points.
That's right.
He's not a 5-hole hitter. He was never going to be. That was never what we signed him for. And so this team is fine if he's hitting 8th or 9th. Obviously Delaney and I talked about last week, you could put Michael Harris the second at 9 and bet Orlando at 8 if you want Harris to turn the lineup over at the bottom of the lineup. But if you have Orlando Arcia at 8 or 9, this lineup's fine. If this team is doing half of what it can do offensively, and you have everybody healthy, and you for the most part, obviously injuries are going to happen, but you can't project what happened to the Braves last year. That's nothing you can ever project for, and you can never be planned for something like that. So I'm definitely with you on that front. And as far as bad contracts go, obviously we all have the emotional ties to the players that leave Atlanta, especially guys on the 21 World Series team, people like Max Fried, game 6, Max Fried, he gets his ankle stepped on and then he turns into a completely different guy. And so you have these emotional attachments. And it's like, guys, look, I don't know that Max Fried's contract is going to age all that well. You get 4 or 5 years into that deal. He's a lefty that has had arm issues already. He's 31 years old. The Braves are not in a spot to where, you're going to have Ozzy Albies that you're going to have to look at re-signing. You're going to have Ronald Acuna Jr. that you're going to look at re-signing. You're going to have some of these guys that you're going to look at re-signing in another 3 to 4 to 5 years. And it's like, can we afford to pay Max Fried $27 million in his age 36 season when we're also trying to pay some of these other guys? And so I think it is, we get spoiled, like you said. And so, I think that I'm glad that somebody says it where people might listen to you a lot more than they're gonna
Probably not.
listen to. No, probably not. But yeah, so I think that's a really good point. Is that a lot of these contracts are not going to age well, and Alex has done an exceptional job of putting us in a spot to where very few teams go into an offseason and it's like, if we can get a couple relievers, maybe a starter and an outfielder, where you can kind of just let it fly. And so very few teams are structured that way. So I think AA's done an exceptional job with this team, rebuilding the farm system. We've got a lot of young arms. We've got some guys, Drake Baldwin, I'm excited about. And so I think you made a lot of good points there, but I want to shift a little bit because I want to pick your brain briefly before we dip out about going into spring training as a player. And so, you played parts of 10 seasons, I believe, in the big leagues. You debuted in 95. Last season was 05, I believe. If I'm wrong, you can correct me there. For Braves fans, you had 22 games with Atlanta in 2004. And so you had a stretch there from 99 to 02 just by looking kind of, I was a young kid then, so I wouldn't have known much, but it looked like you had a stretch there where you might have went into spring training without thinking about, hey, am I going to have a spot on this team?
Sure, yeah.
And you kind of went in more so with, I'm on the team. I don't have to fight for my spot on the opening day roster. So how does it change you as a player going into something where it's like, hey, I might not make the roster, to then having those years where you were going to make it, and then maybe at the tail end of that being, again, going back to fighting for that, so some of these guys that really are fighting for their spots, Grant Holmes, Ian Anderson, Bryce Elder, or even guys like Brian De La Cruz, where it's like, hey, we're kind of trying to figure out how we're going to shape up the last of this bench, our last couple guys. How does it go in, for somebody like that versus somebody like Spencer Swellenbach, who it's like, okay, you're going to be there, or Aaron Bummer, somebody in the bullpen, how does that change for you as a player going into that, and kind of what's your spring training? How does that affect how you kind of perform and what you're working on in spring training?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good phrase you use, right? The opportunity to work on things when you're secure in your spot. You still come in great shape. You got to be ready to go. You're certainly not pacing yourself from a workout standpoint, but you can pace yourself a little bit come bullpen time once things start, pitchers and catchers and games, depending if the team wants to do that. And you'll see it sometimes. Or you'll hear a lot of times good players come out of a game that didn't go well in spring training and they tell us what they were working on. And I decided I was going to throw 8 changeups in a row, whatever it might be, right? Some crazy stuff, and you can afford to do that. And you're right, I've been in every single position you could probably imagine, being the old guy trying to hang on, being the young scare kid, and everywhere kind of in between. It is nice, of course, when you have a guaranteed contract and you feel confident in your spot in the team. I will tell you that my spring training with the Braves is one of my favorites because when I signed with them, I wasn't even originally going to big league camp. I was trying to make some changes, and they believed in those changes, and they were helping me out. And I was eventually able to get myself in camp. They said, you got no chance of making the team. Like, just so you know, like we look at you as the guy that we're going to send you to the minor leagues and see how you can do. And then end up making the team. So it was a nice moment, for me to go through spring training. But that mode is an example for some of these guys that are battling for the couple of spots, and there's not very many that are available, is you got to hit it on day one. Right, you got to be ready to go. Your bullpens have to be impressive. Your batting practice has to be impressive. You got to catch some eyeballs, and then of course you got to do well. I've had spring trainings where I've dominated and gotten released, and I've had average spring trainings or below average where I've made teams. And things can happen. It's just a matter of what the need is for the team. Because as we also know, something happens during spring training. Like we may look at it right now and say, okay, well, is there maybe one bullpen spot available? Is there a bench spot? Maybe that backup infielder right now, they could be battling a little bit, whether it's Cairo or Allen or whoever that kind of situation goes. But then all of a sudden something happens and there's a need actually for a starting spot, whatever it may be. So you just got to be ready for all of those things. It can be emotional for sure. I mean, when you're younger, you feel like you have your whole career in front of you. So while getting sent down is disappointing, you don't feel like it's the end. You get a little bit older, and those things happen. You start to wonder, like, well, did I just throw my last pitch? I will tell you that for the last 8 years of my career, I really thought my career was over. I was fortunate to play until I was 39 and played in Asia and a bunch of other places and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, this is probably it. And then another year, I'd be able to hang on and fight through it. So everybody's different, but there can be a lot of emotion that comes along with it as well. But everybody's kind of ready to go. Last year was interesting. Spencer Strider comes in, and we know who Spencer Strider is and his position on the team. And he was there early. And he was there early doing live batting practice against guys. That was the first time I actually got to watch him pitch live, just sitting behind home plate and watching him face Matt Olson and Austin Riley and all the talk about working on the curveball, which he didn't say at the time, but then we started seeing it a little bit and figured it out. But he was absolutely ready to go before day one even happened. Unfortunately, he ended up getting hurt. But some guys treat it differently, and his purpose there for veterans, like I said, not everyone's necessarily pacing themselves. Sometimes he felt like, I believe what he had said about it was, I felt like I was kind of pacing myself a little bit, and then I wasn't where I wanted to be when the season started. Right, so everyone's got to find their groove and figure out what works for them. But again, of course, the perfect position to be in is that your spot on the team and you can kind of play with how you prep. But it's fun. It's exciting. Spring training. You're excited to get there. And then by the end of it, you're like, man, when is this thing going to be over? It's pretty consistent. All 19 years that I got to play, it's pretty much how I felt.
That's funny because as fans, we're just like ready for more all the time.
Yeah. Well, you get more this year. So it's 14 games that'll be on TV for us this year. So we're going from 4 to 14. So it's more work. So I don't get March off like I used to.
Well, I will tell you, I complained so hard last season. So I'm lucky enough. I work in sports. I have always had bosses who have been okay with me having my MLB TV on in the background while I'm, doing my work. And like, I'll pull up like 4 spring training games at a time. And almost every single time that we were playing, it was radio broadcast only. And I'm just like, I can't sit here and listen because I have to do my job. So I'm really happy that you're working for March. But
it'll be fun. It'll be fun. 14 total. It would be with that new partner that they have in Gray Media. So it'll be some new people to work with and stuff. It'll be the same broadcast crew and probably most of the same people behind the scenes. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. We're looking forward to it.
That's awesome. So I think, Sean, it is about time that we jump into our rapid fire. We have some pretty fun questions lined up for you. All right. I actually thought of one while we were chatting. I would love to know if you could cherry pick any player. You don't have to make a trade. You don't have to pay them. You don't have to do anything.
Ooh.
Which player would you grab from which team and why? For
the Braves for this season, essentially, not just someone to take home and hang out with. That's a great question.
Both.
So, it's it's fun because I always will be thinking about what fits from the financial standpoint, right? That kind of stuff. What's best for the team. I think, listen, you can never have enough pitching. And so essentially I would like to be able to take somebody else's starting pitcher and pair them with Chris Sale and everybody else near the top, which would be great. Which starting pitcher would I want to take right now out of the game for our club? And again, I'm trying to think like reasonable, and I don't have to be reasonable. That's a good one. I mean, I guess give me the good version of Shohei Ohtani pitching. Is fun. That's an easy one to kind of steal. I'm going to get greedy, right? Because we're just having a little fun here.
Yeah.
So that probably be a good one because I feel like Dylan Cease is a real possibility. So that's one. You know what? I'll go Tarek Skubal. Give me Skubal and Sale and 2 nasty lefties at the very top. Why not? Let's bring him over to Atlanta.
Love that.
That's where I would have went with that question. CJ is you would have had to go. I would have had to go with Skubal. So, all right. So next one. If you could be joined in the booth by any former Braves coach or player that you have not called a game with, who would you choose?
It's a good one. So I love when outside take, Brandon out, of course, doing the play-by-play, but if we were going to bring in a second analyst like I get to do with Frenchie once in a while, which is amazing and really fun. There's 2 ways to look at it for me. One, and I'm good friends with him now and play with him and doesn't live too far from me. I've never done anything with John, so it'd be fun to do a game with John Smoltz for sure. And he's been very helpful for me in my career, very helpful getting me over here. With that being said, more often than not, if I'm going to have a third or a second analyst, I prefer to be a position player. And so Chipper's an easy one. There are very few that I can listen to talk, especially when it's something that I don't know as much about with hitting. listening to him when they do those Legends broadcasts are super fun. Listen any other time because he's been out there more doing interviews and talking hitting. You can tell he loves it. And that's a big part of a broadcast is that you got to love it. Some guys come in and just think they're hanging out and it's kind of fun to do, but they're not all the way in. And maybe they're not as passionate as you'd like them to be. Chipper is so incredibly passionate about hitting and knowledgeable. He wasn't just a great hitter. He can talk about hitting. There's a lot of great hitters that can't talk about it or can't teach it. So to be able to do that for a full game would be fun. So, we'll go all the way to the top. Give me Chipper, give me Smoltzy.
That would be awesome. And talking about hitting, what are your thoughts as a former pitcher on the universal DH?
I love it. I think it's better off. I mean, yeah, I loved hitting. It was fun. I didn't hit barely in high school. Like I became a pitcher only as a sophomore in high school, which I guess is I don't want to say common, but it happens more now. But back when I was in high school in the 80s into the 90s, that was not something that happened. So I felt like I was kind of a pioneer of a PO early. But it was super fun to hit, and I did get 2 hits in the big leagues. One of them, by the way, I always tell the story. My first hit came off from Ramon Martinez, Pedro's brother, using Deion Sanders' bat. Deion was my teammate in Cincinnati, so I broke it. So I have it. So yeah, like that kind of stuff is like fun. You know what I mean? Like those stories are fun, and you love getting in there. But it's better for the game. I mean, obviously the pitchers, most of them can hit. The numbers were pretty brutal. We're struggling with offense in the game as it is. So I do think it's better off. I know a lot of people like talk about the strategy of the double switch. I hated it because it means a lot of times you were taking a pitcher out before you wanted to, which is not ideal for your staff either. So I'm okay with the universal DH. And listen, it gives us Marcel 4 or 5 times a night.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as much as you love the things like Max Fried's walk off, I would much rather watch Marcell Ozuna hit 4 or 5 times a game than some of those guys. So, yeah, I agree 100%. So, to put you back on the pitcher side of thing, all right, who was the toughest hitter or the one that you just disliked facing the most throughout your career? Who was the toughest for you personally?
So it was a couple. So when I played, lefties still only had to get lefties out, right? So I could be, lefty specialist, which is what I did for most of my career. I made some starts too. So there was a couple of really tough lefties that I had a hard time with. Garrett Anderson was a really difficult one. Carlos Delgado took me deep 4 times. He was the guy that hit the most home runs off of me. But I think I got him out almost every other time. He was like 4 for 16 or 5 for 16. There was one ground. I still remember a ground ball that should have been an error. So I got him out a bunch, but when he put the ball in play, he got me. And then Manny Ramirez. I have such absurdly awful numbers against Manny Ramirez. It says that I struck him out once. I don't ever remember striking him out, but I know I walked him like 7 times. So he was just a tough out. The righties that had really good plate coverage and could drive the ball the other way, he was a really special hitter. He was a tough one for me.
Very cool. I actually got my start working for the Red Sox, so to hear that was Manny, I'm not gonna lie, kind of made me feel some type of way. I would love to know, what is your most controversial baseball opinion?
Ooh, controversial baseball opinion. Do I have any? We have something we do on my radio show on XM is that every Friday we have a Festivus Friday. We just do it all year round. So go ahead and air grievances, which were never short. They're not always baseball related, but it does feel good to get it off your chest before you head into the weekend. Well, that's a good one. You know what? I was so against ABS when the first idea of the automated ball strike system came up. And I'm starting to come around on the idea. We're going to get a real good run of that in spring training. So that's an area at least where I flip-flopped, where I was absolutely staunch against the idea of ever using robots to call balls and strikes. And now I think if the technology is right and it's good, I think I'll probably be on board with it. So that's probably one of them. And then I joke about, being a left-handed specialist. I do miss that. I like how quickly the games are going now, but I also do miss those matchups, right? We sat there and one guy came in and here comes the lefty to face the big one. Are you going to pinch hit? I thought there was some drama there. That was fun. So I missed that rule. I think for the most part, I know he's not beloved in Atlanta and understandably so, but Rob Manfred, when it comes to the rule changes, I think has done a pretty good job. But I would like to see the lefty specialist come back.
Yeah, that's the bringing one guy in to face one guy was always such a fun thing to watch, because it was that chess match that didn't necessarily impact the game the way a double switch would have or anything like that. So I like that one. That's a good one. All right. So, favorite ballpark to call a game at outside of Truist Park?
So to call a game, it's probably going to be San Francisco or Baltimore. And at this point, doing what we do, it's about the view that you get.
Yeah.
And and the older ballparks, for the most part, have the lower booths. Nowadays, and understandably so, that the booths are going to get put up higher because there's premium seats to be sold. We understand it. We get it. It's all part of the business, right? Where I was for 7 years in Texas, and we were high up in the sky. Pittsburgh's a beautiful ballpark, but we are way up there. You get it. John Sterling has a great line about what a great view you get when you're in Pittsburgh. Not of the field, but it's a beautiful view because you can see downtown Pittsburgh, and it is beautiful, but you can't see the game. Baltimore's got probably one of my favorite booths from the visitor side in San Francisco. There's just something that when you're in those booths, they feel very intimate. You feel like you're right there in the crowd. Those are probably my two favorites.
Gotta know, did you ever meet the possum over in Oakland?
Thankfully, no, but I was absolutely head on a swivel the entire time we were there because I was there quite a bit over the years with them being in the Rangers division. That absolutely freaked me out. Knowing it was there, and people were acting like it wasn't a big deal. Like it's a big deal. Like you're here trying to work, and apparently there's like possum all over the place. So no, thankfully I did not.
I'm sorry, I had to ask.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And we definitely want to know, what is your go-to ballpark food?
So I don't, it's funny. People ask that one a lot, or like what has the best, but I don't get to experience it as much, right? Because you're in the booth and we have press dining. And so I will take walks once in a while and try to get in there. One of them actually at the old, or I should say the new ballpark in Texas, they had these burrito tacos that were amazing. I would make sure that I made the walk. They took them off the menu, which I don't know why.
No.
I'd heard that. At least we'll go there later this year. I'll see what the heck is going on. So that was always, I say always, but for a little time I was there with the new ballpark open. That was kind of a can't miss for me. I'm not afraid to try a hot dog in a spot. Like everyone thinks they have the best hot dog and keep it simple. I know that we've taken ballpark concessions to a whole nother level. It's wild what's out there nowadays. But whether it's, having a Dodger dog or other places that think that they have the best, you got to do it at least once just to check in to see if it's legit or not. So I'm not afraid of a good hot dog, but I don't get to experience it nearly as much as I probably should, even though I'm in the ballpark all the time.
Definitely should. I mean, when you make it up to Fenway this year, get the sausage with the peppers and onions. Get it right outside of Gate A. Get some street meat. It's worth it.
So here's the good. I mean, I'm with you on that one because I do like a good sausage and peppers. But as long as Glab is doing games with us, Glab always gets the Boston trip. So as a guy that's from there, and basically go there every other year. So we have a 3-game series in Boston this year. I will not be there. Glab will be on that one. I know it. That's a fun trip too. And that's another booth. It's not ideal in the sense of the angle that you're at. But of course, it's so old that it's cool because you are right on top of home plate. You're high up. You're a little higher up compared to Baltimore and San Fran, but you are further out onto the field. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's the Billy Bean seat, the Moneyball seat, because they actually filmed that there, which is so cool. So
that's awesome. I'm glad you went with hot dogs. I wasn't sure if you were going to go with Wiley Ballard's milkshake from
in Chicago.
The milkshake man.
Brutal.
He'll never live the milkshake man thing down. So. I do think hot dog's the classic. I like that one. So, All right, this is going to be the last one. And honestly, CJ, we're causing you got to settle a battery mates debate.
Oh,
okay.
Fun.
Delaney and I are each on one side of this, and we've decided whatever your answer to this is the right answer, and the other one loses this debate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
CJ Nitkowski, we've got to ask you, yes or no, pineapple on pizza?
So I won't order it, but I'm not necessarily one that is going to give people a hard time that do. Right? I've had it before.
Such a political answer.
I know, but it's my honest answer. So, because do I like it? No. Have I had it before? Yes. Like especially when you're in the minor league sometimes, and it's back in the day when the food wasn't nearly as good, and they're just throwing a bunch of pizzas out there, and maybe you grab one with pineapple. I would never order it myself, but at the same time, I'm one of these people that like. I don't mind if you do the wave. I don't mind if you bring your glove to the ballpark. I think it's good to do those things. There are some people that have these strong opinions, like absolutely not. Do not do the wave under any circumstances. You shouldn't be bringing your glove to the ballpark as an adult, and you shouldn't be putting pineapple on your pizza. I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to judge you if you do.
I might judge you if you do the wave, but that's just me.
So
listen, and it's been better. But I just feel like you don't have to participate, right? But if 80% of the ballpark feels like standing up in a circle, now I will say this: the thing that gets me with my backwards left-handed brain is when it's not clockwise. If it's counterclockwise, then I will have a problem with it. At least do the wave to make sure it's clockwise.
My whole thing is that it goes on for 5 or 10 minutes. It's like, if you do it like 2 or 3 times, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But to do it for so long, like
It's
that's
fair.
just overkill.
Yeah, I'm in on 2 or 3. That's probably the fair number. Of course, it's building up momentum as you're going, and you make what counts as the first one. Is it the kind of half effort one? Does that count as one rotation?
It's the full run. It's the full run.
Yeah. And then from there you get the rematch.
That's where I'm at. If it takes you 5 to 10 minutes to get one full run, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. They need to put that up on the big screen to let everybody know. Here are the ground rules for the way if you decide to participate.
Delaney's ground rules for the way.
Exactly.
I'll sponsor it.
I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take that W, Delaney, because I'm gonna count that as that pineapple can go on pizza.
He wouldn't eat it himself.
Yeah, that he does it. He lets other people eat it. He's not the old man yelling at the sky.
Not yet.
So
not yet.
Not
Need
yet.
a couple more years.
All right. So CJ, I do this for everybody that hops on here. Let everybody know the kind of where to follow you at, what you're kind of into. I know the baseball season's about to ramp up, but what you got going on and where they can follow you at.
Yep. So I'm on X, just at CJ Nitkowski, and have been for a long time. That's where I do most any interaction on social media. Everything else, I either not there a lot. You might see an account, or I keep it private for family. But X is where I have this place where I can interact. And then as far as I do a radio show on Sirius XM. It shows on 5 days a week. I will usually do it a minimum of 3, 4, sometimes 5, depending on what's going on. And I do that all year round. I get to do it a lot more in the off season than I do during the regular season. But MLB Network Radio, which is the all baseball channel, channel 89 on Sirius XM, and that show is going to move to 2 to 5 here coming up in a couple of weeks. But it's 1 to 4 Eastern right now, and then 100 or so Braves broadcasts, and including 14 spring training games this year. I will be doing all 14. Brandon will not be doing all 14 because he has a couple of basketball obligations he's got to finish out. So I'm not gonna I won't spill the beans on who's filling in, but I'm excited to get down there, and it'll be fun.
Awesome. So I'll do the same little housekeeping we always do here. You can follow us on X, Battery Mates Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify. We're on all of those at Battery Mates Podcast. We try to keep it simple for everybody. And so with that being said, again, thank you, CJ, for joining us. I had a blast. We appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you on again.
Yeah, it was fun. I got to tell you, I've been so impressed since I've taken this job a little over a year ago. The blogging community, all of the podcast community with Braves fans, it's unbelievable how deep it runs and the passion. And so I'm more than happy to jump on whenever I can and talk to amazing Braves fans who love this team so much.
Yeah, absolutely. There's tons of amazing Braves podcasts and bloggers and all of those things. So, well, with that being said, we're going to send this home. So for Delaney over there and CJ down below, I am Sean. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Battery Mates Podcast, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
Bye, y'all.